Right, I'm saying that.
All right, we are now live on Facebook. And that is recording. And I'm going to turn recording on here as well. Welcome participants as you start coming in.
Oh, that's somebody else. Never mind. Is that me? Somebody in here isn't.
We're right at 12 noon. I'm going to just wait a couple more minutes for others to populate this webinar, and then we will begin. Welcome back.
Hello, everybody.
One of our speakers from last time. Thank you for being here.
Sollte man auf jeden Fall fasten, weil man richtig viel saugen lässt, wenn man diesen Tag verpasst.
And we're going to ask everyone to mute your sound to start so that we can begin. I'm going to mute everybody. All right, well, welcome everyone to the second in our summer series of webinars from the International Association for Spiritual Care. Our board members are with us today. I see Georg Vance, Claudia Colli-Reichenbach, and Emmanuel Larte, and a number of IASC members. Welcome. And if you are not familiar with our organization, you can find us at iasc.org. and see other things that are coming up. We'll be having a webinar series also in January, and 2 more in this series on Tuesdays at noon Eastern time. That's Greenwich Mean Time -4. The next one will be moderated by Dr. Emmanuel Larte, and it will be on the main theme of this whole series, which is what is spiritual care in light of COVID from different religious perspectives. Today, we are happy to be hearing from 3 different Jewish perspectives. Next week, we'll be looking at 3 different Christian perspectives. And on our final one on August 11th, we will be looking at 3 different Buddhist perspectives. So we welcome you and hope that you will register again for the other segments of this webinar. And today our focus is on Judaism. So let me introduce our speakers for you. And very pleased and excited to have three extraordinary women who are also, I consider them all personal friends, wonderful colleagues. Our first speaker will be Michelle Friedman, who is a psychiatrist who teaches pastoral care. She received her MD from NYU School of Medicine and received her psychoanalytic training at Columbia University. She is the Stephen and Marilyn Lieberman Professor of Pastoral Counseling at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah Rabbinical School. Did I say that correctly? A modern Orthodox yeshiva. She is Associate Professor of Clinical Psychiatry at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai Health System in New York, and the co-author of The Art of Jewish Pastoral Counseling, A Guide for All Faiths. Our second speaker is Rabbi Michal Springer. She is the manager of clinical pastoral education at New York Presbyterian Hospital and founded the Center for Pastoral Education at Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan in 2009. I got to know Michal through our joint work between Union Theological Seminary and JTS, and we've had a wonderful collaborative relationship. She is a certified educator in the Association for Clinical Pastoral Education and a certified Jewish chaplain in Neshama, Association of Jewish Chaplains. And finally, dear friend Ruchama Weiss from Jerusalem. Ruchama is Associate Professor of Talmud and Spiritual Care and Director of the Blaustein Center for Pastoral Counseling at Hebrew Union College and the Jewish Institute of Religion at HUC in Jerusalem. She's a novelist, an artist, a poet, and an incredibly creative person who's been very involved also with Palestinian, Israeli peace dialogue work, which is how I first got to know her, and a founding member of IASC. So welcome to all our panelists. Our process here is that they are going to each speak for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to break all of you into small groups where we'll ask you to compile some questions or comments that you'd like to bring back when we return to plenary session with the panelists. So with that, Michelle, if you are unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Okay. Okay, thank you. And thank you for this terrific, tremendous honor of speaking to this group. And thank you to all of you for taking time during your lunch or in your wherever it is during your day to sign on to hear the three of us. So I just want to explain that the order that we are going in is alphabetical. It's not by any kind of ranking of the nomination or anything like that. And I think that we're probably going to come out of this with way more in common than is different. And I just want to let you know how I'm going to organize my 15 minutes. I want to start off with two sort of overarching principles. And then I'm going to go more specifically into 4 points. The two principles are going to be sort of Jewish. What's the denominational response? Where does sort of kind of the Orthodox perspective fit in? Then I want to make a couple of comments about religious versus sociological aspects of these issues. Then the 4 points that I want to address, I mean, this could of course go on for a long time, but I am going to stick to 15 minutes, are going to be the medical sphere. Over here, I'm going to talk about pastoral care, like in the hospital and out, and specifically about doctors and families and patients asking for religious guidance. The second point I want to touch on is the impact of the economic downturn in terms of spiritual care during this crisis. Then I want to talk a bit about the larger social and political movements that are roiling around our world. I was going to say coincident, I mean, overlapping in time, but not, unrelated, obviously high related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I really want to focus on isolation, and specifically in the Orthodox world, the disruption of communal structure and the organization of daily life. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I can put my notes in the chat afterwards. I'm speaking from notes, so I don't have any. What do you call it? Thing that I put up, slides or stuff like that. So you're going to be seeing me the whole time. So the overall point I want to make, that Jewish response across the denominations, the overall principles are the same in terms of the tenets of ethical monotheism, of connecting our expression, our love of, our loyalty, our service to God through mitzvot. By that, I mean specific actions that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with Jewish life to some degree. And you know that mitzvot are actions that are rooted in daily activity. And these activities derive from the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, or another way of calling it is the Old Testament. And the difference really, I guess, one large kind of generalization of the difference among the denominations is the degree to which that Torah, the oral law of the written books, and then the written law of those books, and then the oral law, which is the rabbinic derivation over time that deepens and extends that understanding, is seen as binding. How much can that be interpreted? How binding is it? Who controls that interpretation? What is the degree of to which Jews turn to rabbinic law and rabbinic authority for guidance in their daily actions, certainly in which healthcare, medical decisions will figure very strongly. Now, just so you know a little bit about me and where I'm coming from, I would say that the institution, the rabbinic school where I teach, Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, represents like a left wing of modern orthodoxy. We definitely see Torah law as binding, but also in conversation and very much engaged with modernity and contemporary culture. And I'm sure all of you are familiar in your hospital or other work with degrees of Jewish participation, or how people see Jewish participation. I don't want to use a degree language. I want to use an understanding kind of language. So that brings me to the second general point that I wanted to say, which is the kind of religious versus the sociological aspects of all of this. Like how much, somehow my text has gotten stuck. So I don't know how to get back to it, but we'll find it somehow. I got it. Okay. So the religious versus the sociological. So some of what people are familiar with, like the most visible, I don't know which of you have, whom of you have seen what maybe we would call ultra-Orthodox Hasidish or Yeshivish patients in the institutions that you're working with, in hospitals, who are much less engaged with contemporary culture and who have maybe more rigid, as we would see it, gender roles, cultural stereotypes, and a degree of insularity from contemporary culture. So that's really more of a sociologic phenomenon, I would say, than a religious one. And I just wanted to make that point. Now I want to go into the 4 areas that I wanted to delve more into. The first is going to be the medical. And here I'm going to start off, COVID-19 has introduced variables and conditions that have really never been encountered in modernity on this large a scale. Certainly Jewish tradition has encountered plagues and epidemics before, and there is a literature of questions and answers of how to respond to different things that come up with the pandemic. But in modern times, in the lifetime of anybody participating now, that has not happened. So starting off with the activity of healthcare professionals, what does it mean to provide support when you are putting yourself at risk? How much do you risk your own life to give CPR, to enter a room, to go into a home, whatever? This has particular personal relevance for me. I have 3 daughters, 2 sons-in-laws are physicians, one all in New York City. One's a pulmonologist, and my 3rd daughter is a psychiatrist herself who was deployed to a Bronx hospital where PPE was in shortage, and there she was working on an all COVID unit. So these stories from the front lines, which all of you heard, are really quite searing. And this comes to the question, like doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals were being asked to deliver healthcare in ways that conflicted with how they had been taught. They couldn't deliver the best healthcare. They couldn't even deliver sometimes good healthcare. They had to make decisions with limited or scarce resources. And we at YCT had a panel early on, I think it was in March or maybe it was in April, on triage. How do you make, there was an anticipation in New York City of ventilator shortage. How would you make decisions on who would get a ventilator? Would ventilators be shared? I mean, I think all of you have been through or heard some of these kinds of discussions. And I'm sure this is going on in other parts of the country where you now are. Rabbinic law has a lot to say about how you make decisions about triage. And in the Orthodox world, rabbinic consultants would be absolutely central to a discussion about this. This issue is not, of course, limited to ventilators. It extends to testing. How is testing distributed? And when this happy day comes of vaccines, it's a complicated happy day because who's going to be the test group for vaccines? When a good vaccine comes out, who's going to get that? So the healthcare professional sphere is quite complicated. And in the Orthodox world, rabbinic law, rabbinic precedent, I should say, which is how law is derived, would be brought to bear in these decisions. Next, under healthcare, under the medical sphere, I want to talk about the care and comfort of families. Patients and families alike experienced extraordinarily painful and difficult feelings and situations. There was fear. Could you be the infector? Could you become infected by somebody that you love and who is suffering? The guilt about not wanting to be exposed or to care for, or to not being able to be at the bedside of a loved one who was ill or dying was enormous. And here too, spiritual care draws from tradition, from sacred texts, from previous pandemics and epidemics, like I was saying before. And always, I would say, there are a couple of exceptions that I don't think we need to go into now. Preserving life in the Jewish tradition always has precedent over anything else in terms of a violation of the Sabbath, in terms of something that person would be asked to do. The mandate to preserve life is a very central and holy one. And how do you preserve life? Like, what does that mean in terms of extending care, in terms of allowing a visit, in terms of comforting somebody when there isn't enough PPE to go into the room? Or do you allot some PPE so a relative can go into that room? Maybe that's going to mean that a respiratory therapist a day later isn't going to have that PPE. So there, as you all know, a zillion individual decisions that need to be made. Okay, moving on, looking at the clock, I want to talk a little bit about the impact from a pastoral and spiritual point of view of the economic downturn. And this, of course, has affected virtually everybody. In the Orthodox world, which I'm tasked to talk about, life is expensive. In addition to the cost that everybody has, most Orthodox Jews send their children to private religious schools. Now, of course, I understand that this is all elective, but I'm talking about the economic issues that people face. Kosher food costs more. Many Orthodox families have a large number of children. So this is a commitment that people make, taking off for holidays, losing time for work. All of this kind of adds up. The downturn in the economy has, of course, impacted the Orthodox community as well. And as you know, people can't just unplug. You can't all of a sudden stop sending your kids to school, or I don't know, like you're kind of in a life and you're sort of trying to maintain it. And the chaos, the spiritual chaos, the emotional chaos of people being frantic. Like if you're a kosher caterer and nobody's having a wedding, or I spoke to somebody who was on the board of a summer camp. Now, a summer camp closing, obviously it means that the kids, well, what are they going to do? But it also means, are you furloughing the employees? Like what's happening? Every aspect. The person who plays in a band, a wedding band, is economically strapped. The person who does whatever, and a large number, of the ultra-Orthodox community is kind of low income to start with. They're on the margins. And so the impact, the devastation and the fear of the economic downturn is very, very painful. So people who never needed assistance before and who themselves may have been pillars of charity in their own community and might be caught or kind of used to expensive lifestyles are in large numbers facing, a complete disruption in their sense of self and how they organize. I also want to mention, and I hope this is happening on a large scale actually, that the pandemic, that COVID-19 is mobilizing all communities to think about the larger social and political situation in our country and in the world. Oftentimes, I think the Orthodox world can be quite insular and quite, preoccupied with the issues of the community itself. I think this time has pushed people to look at the bigger picture and the interconnected world. It's the old kind of pastoral adage: is our job to comfort the afflicted or afflict the comfortable? And I do think that issues like racial injustice, climate concerns, the fractious nature. I mean, I understand this is an international movement, but I don't think fractious politics is limited to the United States. So this whole is the community and are leaders going to take on bigger value-oriented principles that connect up the communities? This has practical implications. How do people allot the smaller amounts of money they have to give to charity? I just want to put that in. The last thing that I want to spend time on, and this is this really filters into every aspect of Jewish life and certainly Orthodox life, which is the disruption of daily routine and communal organization because of the isolation. Orthodox culture is very community oriented. People, as you I'm sure all know, gather for prayer in quorums of 10. A minyan is 10 in the Orthodox world, I must say a bit sadly, 10 men. So, certainly for the first couple of months of the pandemic, nobody was gathering. I mean, some people were gathering in ultra isolated, ultra Hasidic sectors, whatever. I don't want to get into that now, but we're gathering, Orthodox people gather for prayer in quorums. And some people are used to praying 3 times a day in those minyans. A minyan, a quorum of 10, is required for saying Kaddish, the memorial prayer for a deceased person in the year following his or her death, for reading Torah, for holidays. Now, the other denominations, which are not as restrictive in the use of electricity, started organizing Zoom sessions for some of these religious prayers. So there'd be Zoom Sabbath services or Zoom Kaddish minyanim, minyats, Hebrew for minyans. But in the Orthodox world, that wouldn't be done because people don't use electricity on the Sabbath or on holidays. So it became a kind of a catch-22. It's probably the denomination that percentage per person would be doing this more, but now we're restricting themselves. And there was a lot of discussion, certainly starting around Passover, which was really early on in the pandemic. Would you have a Seder on Zoom? I mean, Jewish people are used to connecting large families, groups of friends, having a Seder together. Were you going to, quote unquote, violate and use electricity and have a Zoom Seder? Or were you going to stick to, the narrow rule of the law and be just whoever could be physically in your home, which obviously was highly complicated due to quarantine. Similarly, gathering for festive celebrations like birth, not the birth itself, but a circumcision, a baby naming, a bar bat mitzvah, a wedding. People plan, obviously, for weddings, certainly, months in advance, for a bar bat mitzvah as well. These are joyous occasions, which would have certainly dozens, if not hundreds of people attending, and that was kiboshed. Now, that's true of all the denominations. I mean, as I said before, much of what I'm going to say is applied to all Jews and, frankly, to all people. So too, it was true for the funerals. Not a happy occasion, generally speaking, not at all. But the Zoom funerals, which I'm sure we've all been to, and the Zoom shivas, in terms of the mourning period of sitting with the family, the immediate family member of the deceased, was really quite heartbreaking. And certainly the early ones were, where people didn't know, like, to tell the community to be on mute. I had a patient whose father died across the country, and we were watching, and she asked me to watch the funeral. I mean, I was in my own house, and we're all watching this on our computers, and I was just cringing inside because they didn't, like, people weren't savvy with Zoom funerals way back then. And it was, the camera was wobbling and people were talking and somebody is, fetching about, nya, nya, nya. And my patient called me up afterwards and she was just crying about the death of her father and the indignity of his funeral on top of it. I think we got better at this. We got better at Zoom Shivas. They kind of became sort of, in a way, deeply touching because people could come in on view from all over the world, but still there was a feeling of isolation. And I really want to end with the theme of general isolation. And this, of course, is true across all human beings in this pandemic, that it was hard for everybody, but it was especially hard for people who were living alone. For single people living alone, I mean, many younger people went back to their families, but some people couldn't do that. Single people who wanted to be dating, whose lives were disrupted, people who were in the middle of fertility treatments, and that was disrupted. Elders living alone was really, really difficult. My mother is 92, and she lives in an independent living facility, an apartment complex. And nobody, and I was very grateful for this, was allowed to enter the complex. We could only visit outside. And it was terrifying for all of us, but for people with loved elders, there is such a fragile population, continue to be so. And it was also kind of, it was so poignant. In this place to have dinner together, but now everybody had to eat meals from little boxes in their rooms. Most of these people are hard of hearing. My mother she's very with it, but she uses a hearing aid. So if she saw her neighbor across the hall, they're wearing masks. So between a hearing aid and a mask, communication is all but impossible. So these elders, and many of whom are not as cognitively intact or as visited on, or can't handle Facebook or Zoom, don't know how to connect, have trouble with that, we're deeply, deeply isolated. So I think that the spiritual care of this time has been comforting our flocks and each other as best as possible, using technology, setting up collateral support within communities, just paying attention to people, giving the monsters names, naming the feelings, the fears, the delayed dreams, the hopes, the anger that everybody was experiencing, and trying to hold our hands together across the Zoom, across the lens, and believing that is in the past, we will come through and there'll be better days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful beginning for us and brings up lots of issues that are very specific to Jewish tradition. I'm gonna pass, well, I can't say the floor, the screen to Michal Springer, Rabbi Springer.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful. And I'm so thrilled to be here with Dr. Pamela Cooper-White and Dr. Michelle Friedman and Dr. Ruchama Weiss, who are all dear friends. I've known Ruchama the longest. We were just saying 30 years ago, we were study partners, Chavruta. We studied Talmud together, and here we are. And 2 years ago, Pam invited me to present a workshop at the last conference at Union, which I love doing. So it's wonderful to be with the IASC again. To frame where I'm coming from, I am a hospital chaplain and an ACPE educator, and I stopped working in the hospital 20 years ago when I gave birth to my older daughter. I continued to do the work, but not in the hospital setting. And last May, I got back into the hospital setting here at New York Presbyterian and was so excited to be back in a hospital environment. Of course, I never could have imagined what this past year would bring with COVID-19. And I have given thanks every day for having the opportunity to be here and to be part of our team and to be providing care. My ordinary job is as an educator. That's the bulk of what I do. But it happened that during the height of the pandemic, overlapping with Passover, I was the interim rabbi on our campus at Cornell, because we were in between rabbis. And so every day I visited patients and spoke with family members and took care of staff. And it's really those experiences that I want to draw on. And as I begin my presentation, I want to give thanks to my students and my colleagues and my friends who taught me so much and accompanied me in the whole being work that being present in COVID-19 has required. So I'm very grateful to you, Pam, for the invitation to be part of this conversation. And we will see what happens. I'm going to share my screen with you. Oh, let's see. There we are. So in a crisis, we call on what we know. We call on the foundations that we have laid. And a disciplined spiritual life means that we have to be laying those foundations all the time because we don't know what will happen. So my presentation is pretty impressionistic. What are my foundations? As we entered into COVID-19, this text was before me all the time. I'm going to read a little bit in Hebrew just to give you a taste. All the texts come from Hebrew texts. I'll mostly be dealing with them in English for the diversity of our community today. Lefichach nivra adam yichidi. ללמדך שכל המאבד נפש אחת מישראל מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו איבד עולם מלא. וכל המקיים נפש אחת מישראל מעלה עליו הכתוב כאילו קיים עולם מלא. Therefore, but a single person was created in the world to teach that if anyone has caused a single life to perish from Israel, and I would say from anybody in the whole world, that one is deemed by Scripture as if they had caused a whole world to perish. And anyone who saves a single soul from Israel or humanity, that one is deemed by Scripture as if they had saved a whole world. So this text was in front of me because in the sheer numbers of people who were afflicted with COVID-19 and continue to be afflicted in other communities today, but less so in our community here in New York. The image of a person as a whole world came to me over and over again. And with each death that I witnessed and each death that I heard about from others who witnessed them, I felt the loss of a whole world. And the severity of that loss and the need to continue to cherish each person as a whole world was a guiding principle for me, because it would have been too easy to get lost in the numbers. Our morgues were filled to overflowing, and soon there were refrigerated trucks out in the parking lot with human beings waiting to be picked up so that they could be buried. And two of my friends and colleagues, Chaplain Linda Golding and Chaplain Jennifer Kent, provided great leadership in early on paying attention to the morgues, paying attention to the people who were working in the morgues, paying attention to the distress of people who were worried about what would happen to their loved ones who could not be in the proper facilities, and paying attention to what was happening to people whose bodies were being stored in the parking lot. So Linda organized a virtual shmira, the guarding of the deceased bodies, dividing up the Psalms among the whole community of people who would recite Psalms and hold these people in mind. And Jennifer would walk by the refrigerated trucks every day and brought me with her one day. And I made it my practice when I came into work in the morning to look, pause, and say a prayer for our beloved human beings who were waiting in those trucks. Each person is a whole world. And the Mishnah continues, again, but a single person was created to proclaim the greatness of the Holy Blessed One. For human beings stamp many coins with one seal, and they are all like one another. But the King of Kings, the Holy Blessed One, has stamped every human with the seal of the first human, yet not one of them are like another. Therefore, everyone must say, for my sake was the world created. Now, this part of the text continues that theme of the preciousness of each human being. And it adds that we have to say, for my sake was the world created, which gives each of us a sense of purpose and efficacy, even in the moments when we feel least able to help. For my sake, the world was created, and I have an obligation to act in this world with a recognition that my actions matter. And in a time of overwhelming loss and need, we have to feel capable, even as we feel incapable. The spiritual imperative to feel that what I can contribute is what I was born to contribute. I was born for this moment. Every day, going to work, knowing there's so much I can't do, and yet I was born for today, and the world was created for today, and the world was created for me to do what I can on this day. So Michelle spoke beautifully about contagion and the fears of contagion and the inadequacy of the PPE and the difficult decisions that needed to be made or we anticipated would need to be made about scarce resources. This Gemara talks about what it is to visit the sick and some of the danger we can encounter in visiting the sick. So from Baba Metzia, the Gemara analyzes the Braita, which is older Mishnaic material. It's actually based on a verse from Exodus. The master said, with regard to the phrase, they shall walk, that is referring to visiting the ill. So the Braita takes a verse, and this is a classic Tanaitic move. It breaks up each phrase in the verse and assigns it a mitzvah, an action that we are commanded to perform. So, in this verse, Gemilut Chasadim is one of the actions that gets tied to the verse. And Bikur Cholim, Gemilut Chasadim is acts of kindness, and Bikur Cholim is visiting of the ill. So the Gemara asks, that is a detail of acts of kindness. Oh, sorry. The master said, with regards to the phrase, they shall walk, one of the phrases in the verse, that is referring to visiting the ill. The Gemara asks, that is a detail of acts of kindness. It's part of something we've already said. Why does the Braita list it separately? Why does it need a whole other word? There should be no meaningless duplication. Every phrase has a meaning. The Gemara answers, the reference to visiting the ill is necessary only for the contemporary of the ill person. As the master said, when one who is a contemporary of an ill person visits him, he takes 1/60th of his illness. Since visiting an ill contemporary involves contracting a bit of his illness, a special derivation is necessary to teach that even so, he is required to go and visit him. So the phrase in Hebrew is ben gilo, someone your same age, someone who is like you. When we visit someone who is like us, there is a special contagion that happens. So for me, in this epidemic, the moment when I felt that contagion the most was when I received a call from a woman whose husband was dying. And she was completely bereft in a very palpable way on the phone, telling me, pleading with me that I had to help save him. The doctors had determined that he was dying. And this woman was convinced that if her husband could hear her voice, if he could be surrounded by prayer, if he could see her, if he could receive care, he would continue to live. She had a very strong spiritual sensibility. And that pleading got me in the kishkas, surrounded my stomach, and gave me a very acute stomach ache. Not while I was caring for her, but later. Because what happened was I went upstairs and I spoke to the doctor, and the doctor had seen so many people in this exact situation die that he prepared me that this man was going to die. And this wife was refusing to let her husband die. And so I did everything she wanted. I advocated with the staff, and she emailed me pictures and prayers that I printed out, and we put them in her husband's room, and we arranged for her to have FaceTime visits with her husband every day with the nurses. I couldn't go in the room because of the PPE situation, but these visits changed her husband's fate, and he lived, and he went home. Now, I wish I could say that this happened for everyone, but we know that it didn't. But sometimes it did. And part of providing spiritual care is being willing to risk failing, because sometimes people do live. And I want to be on the side of hope. I want to be on the side of being ridiculous, because the doctor may say that this man is dying, but we're not in charge of life and death. We're only in charge of the hope that we bring and the fervent nature of the prayers as we facilitate and advocate for the spiritual well-being of the patients and their families who are willing to do everything they can think of to partner with the divine in leading to more life. Now, I know I don't have a lot of time, so I have more slides than I have time, and I'm going to skip through the next ones, although they are great, to come to this last one, which is, when one comes to visit a sick person, one should not sit on a bed, nor on a chair, nor on a bench, nor on a high place, nor above the invalid's head. Instead, one should wrap oneself in a talit, a prayer shawl, sit below the sick one's head, entreat God for mercy on the sick one's behalf, and depart. So what was new for me in COVID-19 is that so much of the praying that I did was public, because I wasn't usually going in the rooms. I would stand outside the door and enter into prayer. And the staff would all watch me because we were on top of each other. And they would hear my prayer and they would witness my prayer. And mostly they wouldn't say very much. Sometimes they would engage me in conversation about it. One day I was outside the room of a man who was dying, and I was praying for him. And a doctor came over to me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I introduced myself and she introduced herself, and I told her I was praying for him. And she looked at me, and I could tell that these prayers meant something to her. And she said to me, "Let's call the family together." And I felt that I had a partner in a whole new way as we joined together and we called the family. And they were floored that we were simply initiating a call because a rabbi and a doctor had been outside the room of their dying father. And we knew that our proximity gave us power. And by calling them, we shared that proximity with them. And we enabled them to participate in the end of his life in a different way. When they were able to be outside the room for their brief visits, that was a tremendous gift to them. But knowing that those of us who were in the hospital were serving as a a pipeline, living in between the world of the hospital and the world beyond, in between this world and the next world, brought them tremendous comfort.
Thank you, Michal. I found myself tearing up listening to your stories. It was really a very beautiful contribution. Thank you. So we turn to Ruchama Weiss from Jerusalem. Ruchama, the screen is yours.
Okay, hi everybody. I should say, I think good evening from Jerusalem, and thank you for inviting me to share some ideas maybe or our experience from Israel. And forgive me, but I will read from my papers because English, as you can hear, is not my mother tongue, so I'll do my best. So, okay, about 8 months ago, the COVID virus broke into our lives and has already managed to produce a glorious variety of slogans and cliches, 3 of which I have listed here. In the remaining time, I want to do 2 things. To examine the common cliches I mentioned in the light of life with COVID-19 in Jewish communities in Israel, and to point out the spiritual challenges and raised by them for us. The second thing is to study together an ancient Jewish legend that addresses the spiritual phenomenon I will point out in the first part, and with its help to show how ancient sources can be read as a language to discuss our contemporary questions. I will start with the cliches and the reactions to them. The corona is equal and it endangers us all equally. Well, as we heard, the corona does not harm us equally for biological and cultural reasons. Those who have large home, not to mention vacation home, those who can afford not to go to work, those who are in good health, those who have social and economic access to medical care, and those who are young are most likely to be protected from the virus compared to elderly and sick people living in poverty. Sorry. Okay. The data regarding the age are well known, and therefore I chose to present the Israeli data only in slide. With regard to the refugee population, the state of Israel, in a document prepared by the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, clarifies that it is known that some refugees do not have health insurance. Others are afraid to be examined because their status is illegal. The document states that there is no way to know how many of the refugees are sick with corona, and therefore there is certainly no way to provide them with adequate medical care and or appropriate isolation. Exact data is not officially presented to the public, but the lockdown imposed on individual neighborhoods in Jerusalem, as well as on individual cities in Israel, show that the percentage of people infected in corona among the ultra-Orthodox Jewish population is greater than their share in the population. Common explanations, as we already heard, are crowded communities, large families who often live in small apartments, limited exposure to secular media, intense communal life, and some authoritative rabbis, at least in Israel, that at the outset of the virus were unaware of relevant information. The second cliche, keeping the guidelines will protect us from the spread of the virus. Seemingly a simple statement that it is easy to agree with. However, this statement covers deep tensions because the guidelines are a list of decisions made by politicians. I want to cite 3 examples that will clarify the complexity of the issue in our society in Israel. So at the beginning of the first wave of the corona, it was determined by our prime minister that the National Security Council will be the responsible body to coordinate all decisions related to the coronavirus. The name of the organization indicates that many of its senior officials are Jewish men who have graduated the military system. The National Security Council set up a committee of experts to advise on planning a strategy to deal with the corona crisis. The team consisted 31 members, of whom only 2 were women, and both were research assistants and not researchers. There is no Arab on the team. The second example relates to the ultra-Orthodox community. One of the most important rabbis in this community is Rabbi Kanievsky, a 94-year-old Jewish scholar. On Thursday, March 15th, the Prime Minister ordered the lockdown of all schools in Israel. The ultra-Orthodox community has nothing more valuable than the existence of the yeshivot, schools for boys and men. And the question of whether to comply with the state's order was discussed throughout the weekend. On Saturday, after midnight, Rabbi Kanievsky instructed that the studies will take place as usual. At the same time, a video was distributed on social media showing the elderly rabbi's grandson, Yanki Kanievsky, addressing the question while giving his grandfather partial and manipulative information. The difficult image of the political manipulation on the old rabbi and the high percentage of corona patients in the ultra-Orthodox communities led to concern on the issue of authority in this conservative society that had so far accepted the rabbi's spiritual and political authority almost without any question. The third and final example, at 1 o'clock in the morning between March 14th and 15th, the previous Minister of Justice, Amir Ohana, declared a state of emergency in the courts. One of the implications of the declaration is that the courts will hold only urgent hearings. On Thursday, March 17th, the trial of the Israeli Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, was scheduled to open. It is easy to see how government decisions in corona matters are losing credibility in Israel. And the third cliche, this day it's safest to stay at home. This statement is true if you are not woman, child, or man suffering from domestic violence. And obviously, if you have a home. An increase of tens or 100% depends on who you ask in contacting the police and nonprofit organizations that deal with domestic violence shows how dangerous it is for large sections of the population to stay at home. The Blaustein Center is responsible for training rabbis to function as spiritual caregivers in their communities. The center also teaches bibliotherapy and group facilitation. A third area, as you mentioned, Pam, is developing the teaching and promoting tools for spiritual coping with the political conflict. This is a joint effort in collaboration with the Rossing Center for Education and Dialogue and Holy Land Trust from Bethlehem. Spirituality, as we at the Blaustein Center understand it, focuses on 3 existential questions: the search for meaning in life, dealing with death, and loneliness. All of these have acute, of course, significance in the days of Corona. At the beginning of the Corona lockdown, we wanted to use our tools to offer community support. So we opened, in collaboration with the popular Jerusalem Cafe and Bookstore, Tmol Shilshom, a Zoom Beit Midrash, Jewish House of Study, named Meaning in Time of Corona. The Beit Midrash operated daily during the days of lockdown and focused on studying Jewish sources that raise existential questions. The Beit Midrash continues to meet once a week. The coronavirus has heightened awareness of human inequality and has brought to the front of the stage issues of ageism, racism, tensions between economic classes, and the plight of refugees. The feeling that there is no one out there to trust increases the anxiety about the unknown. If we add to that the many families experiencing physical or emotional violence, the economic and health and anxieties, and the feeling of loneliness, it will not be difficult to understand that the pandemic times are flooded with spiritual questions on each of the issues I mentioned: loneliness, death, and search of meaning. Now I will share with you a Talmudic legend that often used in a framework of bibliotherapy. I use it in a frame of bibliotherapy, and which we taught in the Beit Midrash, meaning in time of Corona. I will suggest two ways to read it. Both will illustrate a bit from our work in the field of bibliotherapy. Just a second, now I have to see the screen myself. The sages taught, a person always be soft like a reed and not stiff like a cedar. It occurs that Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, came from Migdal Gdor, from his rabbi's house, and he was riding on a donkey and strolling on the bank of the river. He was very happy, and his head was swollen with pride because he had studied much Torah. He happened upon an exceedingly ugly person who said to him, "Greetings to you, my rabbi." But Rabbi Elazar did not return his greetings. Rabbi Elazar said to him, "Worthless person, how ugly," sorry, I have some difficulties. "How ugly is that man? Are all the people of your city as ugly as you?" The man said to him, "I don't know, but you should go and say this to the artisan who made me. How ugly is the vessel you made." When Rabbi Elazar realized that he had sinned, he descended from his donkey and prostrated himself before him. And he said to the man, "I have sinned against you, forgive me." The man said to him, "I will not forgive you until you will go to the artisan who made me and say, 'How ugly is the vessel you made.'" He walked behind the man until they reached his city. The people of his city came out to greet him, saying to him, "Greetings to you, Rabbi, Rabbi, Master, Master." The man said to them, "Who are you calling Rabbi, Rabbi?" They said to him, "To this man who is walking behind you." He said to them, "If this man is a rabbi, may there not be many like him among the Jewish people." And they asked him, "Sorry? For what reason do you say this?" He said to them, "He did such and such to me." They said to him, "Even so, forgive him, as he is a great Torah scholar." He said to them, "For your sake, I forgive him, provided that he accepts upon himself not to become accustomed to behave like this." Immediately, Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, entered and taught, a person should always be soft like a reed, and he should not be stiff like a cedar. I first encountered a topical use of this legend many years ago in a newspaper interview. A young man with Down syndrome told the reporter that he uses this legend in response to children mocking him. "Go and say to the artisan who made me, 'How ugly is the vessel you made?'" He would reply them. Excited, I cut and saved the interview. In those days, I still didn't know that I too would have a daughter with special needs, and I too will hold for a moment the legend of the ugly man as a backrest and moral support in difficult times. The first interpretation is close to the literal meaning. One sage had completed his period of study and he is riding his donkey by the river. It is said that it was Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon. Other versions claim it was another sage. We will never, therefore, know who the arrogant sage was, but it doesn't really matter. Since this sage is me, is us, we all sometimes fall into the pit of arrogance and condensation, riding on a cloud of self-love and turning other into unnecessary object. The sentence, "and his head was swollen with pride because he had studied much Torah," exists only in few textual witnesses, and yet it is my favorite. Someone over the generations has seen a need to emphasize that Torah study can cause rudeness. The ugly man sought to congratulate the rabbi and in return suffered insults. The rabbi calls him Reika, empty, claimed that he is extremely ugly, and ponders aloud the question which today we would call racist. Are all the people of your city as ugly as you? The turning point occurs when the ugly man refuses to bear insults. If there ugliness or deviation in the humanity, then all of these also exist in God, in whose image we were created. Thus, rudeness became a spiritual conversation. I found another topical translation of the legend at the Pride Parade in Jerusalem in 2016, a year after a religious fanatic murdered Shira Banki, a high school girl, just because she participated in the Pride Parade. Along with the shock of the murder, there were voices of rabbis who continued to curse the LGBTQ people. In response to the murder and the rabbis condemning the LGBTQ people, a large Pride Parade has held in Jerusalem in 2016. I was privileged to receive from a group of Orthodox LGBTQ a sign with picture of one of the rabbis who cursed them, accompanied by a quote from the legend we just read: "Go and say to the artisan who made me." At the end, the ugly man complied with the rabbi's apologies, only due to the pleading of his fellow citizens, who according to the rabbis are also ugly. To his consent, he attaches an interesting condition, provided that he accepts upon himself not to become accustomed to behave like this. Why did he not demand more, provided that he accepts upon himself not to ever behave like this? The ugly man is a compassionate person. He knows that the rabbi, as well as many others, will again fall into the trap of stereotypes. Knowing human nature, he is willing to forgive even those who succeed only at times. Considering the spiritual issues we are dealing with these days, the legend emphasizes that there is no leader who will do good and not sin. We have the responsibility to confront our leadership and its sins. It is not an optimistic legend, and I'm sorry for that. This day, it would be more comforting to bring a legend teaching us that we can trust our leadership, that we have someone to lean on with closed eyes. But the truth is that closing our eyes is not a moral option. And from the social and political reading to the spiritual reading, which internalizes the characters as we do in the practice of dreams interpretation. I would like to see all the characters in the legend a projection of one central character. For now, the rabbi will be my central character. He seemed to be in a particularly good situation in life. He learned a lot. He is enjoying a trip while riding his donkey. In Hebrew, the word donkey, chamor, and material, chomer, are from the same root. The sage seems to feel that he has conquered the material world. He is above materiality. Suddenly, the smart, successful guy experiences an unexplained fall that undermines the good feeling he just had. The ugly man is an expression of the soul of the sage. The sage feels he has a deep inner ugliness that he cannot bear. He feels his fear grows, and he feels the inner ugliness casts on all his town people, on all his other experiences and skills. We know that situation. From the feeling that we are on the top of the world, it is easy to fall into depression, and self-hatred. The wise man becomes ugly in his own eyes. This is what mental crisis may look like. The ability to see the light at the end of the crisis is by understanding that we must integrate all parts of the personality and all life experiences. For all we have is created by God. It will take time to understand the power of the ugly parts and praise it. In the meantime, we will have to find strategies that will keep us from getting used to doing so to ourselves. Isolation, financial difficulties, lack of leadership, sometimes lack of family, or worse, abusive family, fear of illness and death, lead us to an acute encounter with ourselves, what we have managed to do and with what we did not, with the healthy and toxic parts in ourselves, with the challenges and with our feeling of failure. No, we do not have a panacea for spiritual and emotional pains, but we do have the ability to talk about them within the community, of course, with honesty and courage. We can share fears and pain and gain understanding and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchama. And thank you to all of you, Michelle, Michal, and Ruchama, for your very powerful sharing with us. We're going to take a very quick break while I transition you all into your small groups. And let me just suggest that as I'm doing that, you might want to take your eyesight off your screen and give yourself a bit of an eye break from Zoom for just a moment. I'm going to put you into small groups and invite you for 15 minutes to talk about what you've heard and to raise up questions and comments that you might like to bring back into our final session as a whole group together again. If you want to, you can record those in the chat when you come back. We would invite you to choose a recorder for your group if you're going to want to keep track of your comments and questions when you come back. And I will bring you all back in 15 minutes. You'll get like a 60-second warning, and then you'll be automatically brought back into the whole room. So if you'll bear with me here, I'm going to put you in your groups now, and you get a chance to just reflect together on what you've heard and what your questions are. Right. This should be happening now. There are a few of you still in the main room. Did you not get assigned? The call is back. Okay.
So maybe they're not really here.
Valerie and Ted, are you here? They should automatically have gone to rooms. So.
Valerie is here.
Okay, Valerie, I think, yeah, you have to do that.
Ted
And,
was
please accept the prompt to join your small group. All right. So, gosh, those were Absolutely wonderful presentations, you all. I was very moved. And I also felt like there was wonderful variety in what you shared so that people could get a sense of
Yeah.
the breadth of the traditions and a lot of commonalities too, and not just with Jewish practice, right? In terms of people's
Right.
situation and the need for prayer and the need for some form of connection and all of those things that you brought up, all of the existential issues that this pandemic has raised. I thought this was really, truly wonderful.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle,
You
I
wanna-
know you. I was participating. I know where I know you from.
Ah, what?
I was participating in a workshop that you facilitated in New York many years ago. I was so
Gosh.
impressed that
Oh, what was, do you remember what it was?
yes. You know, Bill Carter, I think he invited you. Maybe Bill Carter, Michelle.
Who? I'm sorry?
Bill Carter or Michelle something. You were
Prince,
Oh. Yeah, this,
Michelle Prince.
there. Yes.
oh, in California?
Ah,
Okay, there it is. There it is. Okay, got it. Got
Okay.
it. Yeah.
It was
By the
great.
way, I'm a huge bibliodrama like devotee, and I try to use that anytime I can. I had Peter Pitzler come to Choveveh to teach
Wow.
bibliodrama. Yeah, he did it. He did a really extensive thing, and I have used it. I actually did the same verses in 3 places with a group of young people at Hadar in Berlin and with the yeshiva students, and it was so, and in my own kihila, which is like kind of my age. And it was so interesting to see the different way people interpreted the same thing or what they did with it. You know, it was from Chukat when Hashem tells Moshe, you know, sorry, you hit the rock, you're not going into the land. And so, and I had like, you know, someone was Moshe, someone was Aaron, someone was Miriam, we brought her back from the dead. Someone was the rock, somebody was the water, somebody was the staff, mateh. And it's just, and God, of course, it's just totally amazing. Like it is, in my mind, like the way to go, the way to teach, you know?
So we have
Well,
to
I
bring
loved listening to both of you. You were
Oh, thank you.
fabulous.
We were good. We were a good trio.
It's dark here.
You say it's dark?
Yeah, it's dark. It's night.
Oh, right. That's right. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Michal, what are your kids doing for this summer? What are the girls doing?
Ariella is working on a book project as a paid intern, which is nice for her.
Yeah.
So she's doing a lot of transcribing and she has her own projects. Tali's taking a course in criminal justice
Wow.
at John Jay College.
Wow.
Huh,
Yeah,
cool.
it's pretty fantastic.
That's online, I'm assuming.
It is online.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good. So, Ruchama, I loved hearing just the way that everything gets understood through the political ramifications, the intertwining of the spiritual and the political, in paying attention to how the messages are grounded in political reality and the need to question the truisms is very powerful.
Also, I'm glad you raised up family violence and
Yes.
the idea that there are also mental health and addiction issues too, that isolation is one of the primary risk factors. You're asking people to isolate. So done a couple of webinars on that for other groups. But of course, the battered women's shelters are in a real situation because they have to figure out how to house people. And so, you know, they're creating networks of homes where people can go because the shelter may not be available. And it's really been a crisis in the country. And there, some battered women's agencies have had like double in phone calls on their crisis hotline.
Yeah.
Addiction also, apparently, there's statistics now that there's a rise in relapses and people overdoses.
I spoke with
Yeah.
one of my ultra-Orthodox friends that I don't even know her name because she can't risk herself by telling me her name. So we're just speaking over the phone and she has to call me because I can't know her phone number. And she said that she can't stay at home because she doesn't feel safe with her husband. She's not afraid that he's going to kill her or even to hit her, but emotionally is harming her all the time because she's not really an ultra-Orthodox anymore. She has to pretend because she can't leave her kids and leave the community. If you watched Unorthodox, so you understand how difficult it is.
You know,
she-
Ayala, have you seen Ayala Fader's book? It's actually, it just came out a little while ago, and she studied this. It's called Hidden Heretics. And it's really all about these people who are leading double lives. I treat a number of them, as a matter of fact, at 2:00 today.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. It's called Hidden Heretics. And it's written by an anthropologist, Ayala Fader, Feder. The companion book, by the way, which also just came out, is called Degrees of Separation. And that's by Schneier Zalman Neuwirth, N-E-U. If you look up Degrees of Separation, it'll pop up. And he's a former Chabadnik. He grew up in Old Chabad, not the Baal Shuva Chabad. And he left and became a sociologist. But what he studies is like 75 Satmar and Lubavitch folks who've left and where they land. And it's a different topic, like people don't become, like, you don't just one day leave, it's the rest of your life. Like, where do you land Jewishly, identity-wise, spiritually, that kind of stuff. Both books are a little academic-y. They're not popular, but they're very readable and they have stories. And, it's the first that I've seen. I know both of these people a little bit, but it's the first I've seen in years of something published on these topics. But I think that Degrees of Hidden Heretics is exactly what you're talking about. My woman lives in Williamsburg. She comes from a very prominent family. It's unusual in that her husband started this journey and she has really joined him intellectually and emotionally. So they're on the same page because a lot of these couples split up and they have a bunch of kids, of course. So it's like they're totally tormented. Their kids were going to school during the pandemic. Nobody is wearing a mask, but the crap that they're learning in school is so horrible. It's killing her. She has her kids watching these great courses, videos at home. Can you imagine? And they are going to these completely, like to say, I don't know, primitive schools is an understatement. Her boys who are like 9 years old and 7 don't really speak English. But they can understand the videos. So it's just like, it's really an altered universe. And these people are stuck. Leaving is, the economics, the fear of family, whatever is so painful that they just don't, they're really stuck.
I'm sure you've all seen the film Unorthodox, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I thought I don't know what you thought. I thought it was fair. I didn't think it completely made the ultra-Orthodox seem like evil people. I thought it was a fair representation of very different ways of viewing the world, but everybody's rooting for her to get out, of course, because she needs for her life.
Right.
Yeah.
Just want to remind everyone, as people are starting to return from small groups, that we are still recording, and this is the room that's being recorded. So.
Oh, I forgot that part.
All right.
Oh, boy.
No one has said anything untoward.
Yeah,
Ted, you've left your small group, is that right?
I did not realize that. Sorry, I should not have said what
No,
I
that's
said.
good.
No, I should never.
I'm going to
I
be
didn't
calling people
identify.
back in about 5 minutes.
So Pam, how can we get a hold of the recording? Is that
It's
something
on
you can send to
It'll be
us?
on Facebook.
So I'm not on Facebook.
Well,
Talk about heretics.
I can send you a link.
I'm with you.
That would be great.
And you should be able to access it even if you don't have a Facebook account, but anybody can go on Facebook and look. So you
Okay.
should.
If you send me a link, that'd be great.
Yeah, I am also recording it on Zoom, but last time that didn't work well, so I'm not 100% sure the Zoom recording is going to be as useful to you.
Okay.
The other one
Thank
gets everything. Small groups don't get recorded, so whatever they bring back to us, they'll have to report back here. And then as your publications, the idea was to take into consideration some of the questions that were raised by the membership. But
Great.
that's up to your discretion. We have no deadline yet, by the way, for that, because we have to get the journal contract set up and everything. So you've got plenty of time.
Sure, what are we talking about?
When this all gets published as a journal.
Oh.
Nice.
Hello,
Ted.
Don't freak out. There's plenty of time, Michelle.
No, it's okay.
All right. A few more minutes in the groups.
I'm very confused about where I'm supposed to be and what this is.
You would have been in a small group and somehow you got out of it. I don't know where you were supposed to be.
No, I never got into the small group
Oh.
because
Oh,
I didn't turn it off. I went off screen and somehow and then I was checking and I was trying to see if there was a new email, which I didn't.
let me see. Well, it's almost too late now. They're going to be coming back soon. So why don't you just hang out here?
Okay, I can just, okay.
This is the green room. This is the backstage. Michal, your description of the morgues in the parking lot really got to me.
Yeah.
About going into work every day and walking by there or seeing them out the window or whatever and realizing, and especially with, the Jewish practice of burying people immediately, there they are sitting there. And so, you try to get some, a Kever Kadisha or something going to keep them protected, but for how long? I mean, that was a nightmare, I'm sure, for many people.
Yeah.
Well, it is, right? It's not all resolved.
No, we don't have the trailers, but I can imagine that other places do. In parts of the country or around the world where there are surges.
Yep.
Well, I'm thinking too of places like in the upper Midwest where you can't do a burial in the ground during parts of the year because it's too hard frozen. And so where are people going to be?
What do they usually do?
Yeah, right.
The funeral homes have facilities where they store them.
Really? That's just the common practice?
And yeah.
I did not know that.
My Minnesota husband said that.
Huh.
You can't get into the ground to bury them. Like a tundra. So,
That's, I don't know. I don't want to interrupt. I feel awkward saying something.
you could say something. Go ahead.
No, just the fact that yeah, I've heard of those issues with frozen ground, which is frozen, you can't bury till spring, as well as things like gravedigger strikes. I mean, those are some of the historic things where there are issues of like, what do you do with what do you do when you can't bury immediately? And then, so there is precedent for that question.
Yeah. Well, a student of mine had COVID. She's in our DMIN program in chaplain educator. And she got COVID. Her husband got COVID. He died of a heart attack hearing the news phone that he tested positive.
Oh my God.
Then her 85-year-old sister died, and then her brother died.
Oh.
All of it. Recovered.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is that she was told by the hospital where he was in New Jersey that they had to cremate him because there was no other way to dispose of his remains.
Yeah, that was an issue in Europe too.
And
Yeah.
isn't that against Jewish law
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, yeah.
It won't
She's
have-
not Jewish, but it occurred to me that that could be a real problem for, and I think Muslims, Catholics don't like it either. I mean, it's,
Mm.
well, I think I'm going to bring everybody back from their small groups now. So let me go do that. Close all rooms. They'll get a 60-second warning. We'll start seeing people.
Pam, thank you so much for inviting me and for making this happen. It's really wonderful.
Oh, today has been really terrific. May all of them go as well as this. You from, since you're here in the green room with us. Ted.
Ted's one of my residents.
Oh, okay,
Ah.
great.
Proud to be.
So you're at
Proud to have you.
All right, people are starting to come back now, but not enough. Are they?
Here they come.
I'll tell you, I've gotten better at Zoom as I've been doing these. It's all the
A whole new
different.
skill set.
Dr. Weiss, are you still there, by any chance?
She is here.
Well, yes, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Ted Lichtenfeld. I'm a conservative rabbi in the United States. It occurred to me there was a huge disjointed nature between present about the situation involving Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, and then you're presenting perspective, but it's coming from an institution that has no political or almost no, so I hate to say it, but almost no social influence in Israel. And is just sort of, I was just thinking about that. If you know, you understand what I'm sort of saying or asking?
No, I'm sorry.
Hey, Ted, I'm going to ask you for a second while we bring everybody back, okay?
No, yeah, that's fine. Whatever you need.
Okay, so I think everybody should be back by now, I hope. And so if you want to put some questions in the chat, I will start looking at the chat. And if you want, I think we're a small enough group that we can also allow people to raise a hand. I'm going to unmute everybody. Did you all, were you all okay for speaking in your breakout rooms? You were able to do it technically? Yes? Thumbs up? Great. Okay. So let me unmute everyone here. And the first question we have from a group is, what are some strategies that we can employ to help us stay with the patient? So LaRonda, do you want to explain your question a little bit more?
Yes, as we were talking, one of our group members shared, we all shared, sometimes when we are with patients, we feel anxiety ourselves and we want to leave. We would rather be anywhere else besides where we are. What are some ways or some strategies that we can employ in the moment to help us stay in the room and with the person in front of us?
The panelists?
So I would say that the fact that you recognize that you want to bolt and get out of there is like the best starting place. I always tell my students, you've got to take your own emotional pulse. And, some people, you probably were taught this, pause at the threshold of a room to just say a prayer to gather themselves before going in, and to just have that moment to sort of center. But then if you're there at the bedside and you want to bolt, I would say, a really helpful remember that just staying put, just keeping yourself in that chair is meaningful to the patient. The patient probably wants to leave more than you do. Wants to leave their situation more than you want to leave. And just staying there and being present and bearing witness and keeping company with that human being's experience is a great, great pastoral gift. So if you can just stay there and stay with your anxiety, try to name it, try to just, it's a lot to do all at the same time. Just to sort of keep tabs on it and stay in that chair. That's good. I'll leave it to my colleagues to take it further.
Panelists, do you mind if I jump in for a second? Because what Michelle said triggered something for me that, a lot of my work has been about countertransference and intersubjectivity. And what I would also say to you is that it's just like what Michelle was saying, the patient probably wants to jump out of that room even more than you do. I would say, in a way, it may not just be your own reaction, although it, of course, is, but it also may be reflective of what they are experiencing. And so you allow yourself to sit with that and experience it, and that will open up your empathy toward that patient even more deeply, because I guarantee that whatever you're feeling in that moment around anxiety, they're feeling exponentially more, and it can give you a way of experiencing what they're feeling. Okay, I'll stop. I'm not the panelists.
Yeah.
I love what you said. I couldn't have said it better.
Are there other questions that came up in your small group or other comments?
We also wanted to hear a little bit more about bibliotherapy. That is a new term for me. Can we hear a little bit more about that?
Wow, yeah, if you have a week or a year, maybe. And I think, Emmanuel, I would love if you will add to that, because I remember your fabulous lecture on bibliotherapy. So as we defined it or do it, work with a text, basically it's a therapy that you use text in order to be like that voice in the therapeutic process and in the room. But I would say, wow,
Can we? I can't hear.
Somebody's unmuted and the background noise is too much.
So maybe we can mute. Okay, great. So I would say more than that, because we decided to work with texts that are very important. I don't want to say holy to the community, because we have a lot of secular students, but also for our secular students, they are Jews, and therefore the Jewish texts are very fundamental for them, very important for them, very dear for them. So therefore, it's not just like you be part of the therapeutic process, but it is working with texts that are holy for the community, using them as a language to describe our fears, our anxieties, our hopes. And another thing that we are doing in this field is doing it in a group setting, not one-on-one, but in a setting of groups. So you have like a community that's sitting with you, reading the same text, trying to understand the text, and at the same time trying to understand each other and trying to understand the whole soul, while using the old words. And I have to say that I'm not surprised that bibliotherapy is such huge field in Israel. Almost in every university you can find bibliotherapy and degree in bibliotherapy, because we read all ancient texts in Hebrew. So it is, and I think it helps us to connect ourselves to the holy text and to understand the world, the words in the ancient meaning and also in our days meaning. And so the texts we're using them as a language to understand ourselves, and at the same time we're using our life experience in order to give interpretation to the text. So basically, this is what we're doing. Emmanuel, can you say something about that? You're muted.
You can
I really
unmute.
think I couldn't say it better. I love the way in which you utilize the story with Rabbi Elazar. I mean, I think that was just so so I think you illustrated it so beautifully. Thank you.
Well, and it doesn't always have to be a sacred text, does it?
Right.
No. We're doing it with sacred text, but the usual way to do it is not with sacred text. And it is also not just about reading, but also about writing text. So we're doing both reading and writing text.
Oh. Other questions from the small groups or from anyone individually? If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question. Dan, hi.
Well, no, general comment of deep appreciation for the way that the three of you, Michelle, Michal, and Ruhama, sort of the word complementary insights, ending with the question of the existential questions. I mean, what makes spiritual care spiritual? Well, this is what makes spiritual care spiritual, dealing with these issues. And then the moving testimony of caregiving in the hospital, prayer, Michal, that was so moving. And then having started with, some theological principles, not that the logic, that's the logic, what I mean in the presentation this morning. That also you included the social political dimension that is so important. I mean, it's very different experience, the pandemic in the United States that say in Cuba, where I am involved in the training of chaplains, very, very different for a variety of reasons, socioeconomically, the culture of sacrifice and solidarity that one finds there. So I'm very, very grateful. I don't have a particular question, but I really wanted to express appreciation. This has been very rich and encouraging. One feels like really risking faith, to use Michal's expression. The fruits, we are not in charge, we are not responsible for giving fruit or for making things grow or even healing per se, or even faith per se. We are responsible for loving the other, for goodness sake. That is so simple. And that we can, and that was so clearly there.
Well, and what was the very short quote that you gave that's kind of a touchstone for you about the world was created for me, or I was, what was the exact quote?
Everyone must say, for my sake, the world created.
I was thinking too how Protestants in particular right now seem to be very excited about the phrase from Esther about for such a time as this. And
yeah,
I think that all of us have been thrust into situations in teaching and leadership and pastoral care, spiritual care, that we never a year ago would have anticipated all of the things that we had to figure out on the fly. And for such a time as this, but you kind of gave me a sense of encouragement that we are the ones who are here right now. We are the ones in this place. And so it is up to us to partner with God, I would say, to do what has to be done and to discern what has to be done in community, which is also why I appreciate this kind of group conversation, because I think we we glean wisdom from one another when we can't figure it all out on our own. Are there other comments or questions that came out of the small groups? What were you all talking about? Georg, unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Michal, we were all touched by your when you talked about praying in front of the doors of the patients, and there was another point you said that for some Orthodox people the law is higher than praying. So I understood it, and I wonder. Can be a law, so it's totally other world as I am used to. So is praying, so is it right the way I understood it, that they can't pray because they refuse electricity and therefore there is no way out of this dilemma, or are there other ways of creativity to ensure the prayer?
Well, I'll respond to that a little bit. In terms of the very early days of the pandemic, I was referring to these prayers that require a quorum. People would still pray individually on their own, not saying the prayers that require a quorum. Then there was there was a move towards like praying. For example, in Israel, many of the homes have balconies. So people would go out on their balconies and they would count as a quorum, but they would be, social distance from each other. More recently, as things have opened up, I'm in New York, in the Northeast, there have been quorums outdoors or in smaller groups indoors and saying these prayers. But the part that I was referring to, was early on, let's say on the Sabbath and on holidays, when most Orthodox people wouldn't use electricity, that they would then be confined to a different prayer experience. They could certainly do the individual prayers, but they couldn't do the ones that require a group. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's how I heard it. So let me know if there's more. Maybe somebody else wants to say something as well.
Other comments, questions? We have time for at least a couple more before we sign off. Are there any other elements that were kind of struck you as you were talking in your small groups that you thought were important to note?
So our group also expressed our interest in this very unique, historically very unique time of seeing our religious, non-religious law, rules and expectations, our values, pressed by the physical limitations of coronavirus, this pandemic situation. So this challenge creates a very unique opportunities for us to really look into the basis of our expectations, or we also hear a lot of times the moral distress that the clinicians are suffering. That's because the area we are challenged is really a lot of things physically that we believe certain spiritual care and things we normally used to do, a lot of things we cannot do because of the restrictions, then that poses the moral questions because a lot of things that we see as how things should be and must be done is challenged. So it's almost like existentially this coronavirus cannot is challenging our should be and must be. And we look into the basis of our expectation and values and beliefs to see if, and then so we make adjustments to do it different ways. And at the same time, on the religious core, if we believe in, on the base, the bottom line as we say we are here to love each other, and also God's mercy, and that's bottom line. So on the bottom line, we question ourselves how God's law for the humanity serves this unique situation, rather than we serve the law, but then God's understanding and love of humanity, how we humans see a meaningful connection with the divine and connection with our heritage at the same time in this unique situation, how to address this challenge to, in a way, remake our expectation and our moral basis. I don't.
Well, I think, Michelle, you said, that to save a life supersedes all other law. So always that fundamental principle work. It raises a last question that I'd like to raise is, in terms of those existential questions, the question of theodicy, I guess, also occurs to me. And have any of the three of you experienced people in this pandemic time feeling that they are now suddenly questioning, how could a benevolent, loving God allow such suffering to happen in this specific time? Has the pandemic brought up new questions around that didn't come up with other kinds of crises or disasters?
The first thing that occurred in my mind that I can be very cynical and said that after the Holocaust, we understood that point. We got it. We don't need COVID. No, I never had.
Right, because it's not human caused, and it's a different. You could say the Holocaust was something that human beings created, that evil, but this is something that's part of the natural world.
Yes, but God, could manage to do something, especially because it was the Jewish people, and Jewish believers believe that we are the chosen people, so he could do it, but he didn't. So we're not surprised. I think we're not surprised.
So the text that I skipped was the one that dealt with theodicy, and a very clear pushback that welcomes protest.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be respectful of the time.
Could you share just the text now?
Do we have a moment for me to do that?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So here we are. So here, I'll put it in my slideshow. Oops. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan entered to visit him and said to him, "Is your suffering dear to you?" Rabbi Chia said to him, "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward." Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Give me your hand." Rabbi Chia bar Abba gave him his hand, and Rabbi Yochanan stood him up and restored him to health. So there's a joining with the person who rejects. It's kind of the counter to all of Job's friends who are encouraging him to say that it's meaningful. And here there's a restoration to health that comes and saying neither it nor its rewards. Lohen v'lo scharen. And then there's the second iteration of the story where Rabbi Yochanan, who was the rabbi who stood the person up in the first version, is now the one who falls ill. And a different rabbi comes, Rabbi Hanina, says to him, "Is your suffering dear to you?" And he says, "Neither it nor its reward." And now it's Rabbi Hanina who stands him up and restores Rabbi Yochanan to health. And so the final piece is, so why couldn't Rabbi Yochanan stand himself up? And the Gemara says a prisoner cannot free himself from prison.
Oh, what a great end. That was a beautiful way to end.
So the idea that we can protest, but actually we can't do it alone. We need to hear one another's protests and join with one another, and that's where the healing comes from, and the possibilities of transformation and liberation.
Yeah.
Great.
that is a perfect place to end as community, that we have joined together today as a community to share all of these things. I want to thank again Michelle and Ruchama and Michal for your deep sharing with us, and to all the participants, IASC members and guests. We're so happy that you were able to join us. And please come again next week, same time, literally same station on Zoom for our exploration, where Dr. Emmanuel Larte will moderate a session on the same topic from the 3 different Christian perspectives. So thank you all so very much. Board members, Emmanuel, Georg, and Claudia, would you stay on for just a moment? And we'll release everyone else. Love to the panelists. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop recording.